Well, we're closing up our stewardship season today. Whew. Okay. I will tell you this, it's one of the more exciting seasons in my spiritual journey because it's when we're measuring, okay, what's my response to God in this very difficult area of finances? How am I doing in trusting God? How am I doing in putting Him into motion through my life? All these areas get touched by our giving. And if you're a visitor to here today, I just want you to know we're not going to be shaking you down. We don't expect you to put anything in the plate. The only thing we want is for you to encounter this amazing God that we follow, that we believe in. This God who wants to bless your life and guide you through the difficulties and care for you personally and has heaven waiting for you and brings that heaven into your life right now. So our goal is that that's what you receive. But for the rest of us, there's a passage I want you to consider from Luke chapter 12. Jesus said, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And Jesus told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced plentiful. And he thought to himself, "What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops." And he said, "I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And then I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' And so it is, the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God." This is the word of the Lord. One time, I ended up going to a school. Everybody in my junior high, they went to that school, and I went to the other school. Okay? And so if you've ever been the new kid in town, you know, it's an awkward experience. You don't know anybody. Everybody's checking you out. Who are you? You know, you didn't go to school with us. And so, you know, I'm in that vulnerable place. And didn't take long, first couple of weeks, you know, there were, you know, people on the football team that had a long walk home. And so I would just put these guys in the back of my car and take them home, people that you kind of wouldn't take home, you know. Then there was this one kid getting bullied, and, you know, a bunch of guys were pushing him around, and I stepped in, you know, hey, you know, don't pick on the innocent guy, you know. And so that was an awkward situation to step in for the victim. And then there was this girl, she was going to commit suicide. I'm like, oh my gosh, you can't do that. And so I pulled her aside, and turns out she was one of the popular kids, and, you know, I told her about having a life with the Lord and, you know, just changed her perspective on everything. And so this is like the first couple of weeks of my new school, and I heard this conversation as I was going by. Oh, the new guy, he must be one of those born-agains, okay? He's trying to be cool, and no, I was a born-again. You see, Christ's followers, they're identified by Christ's values. When you're a Christ follower, guess what? You and I, there's just certain traits about us that everybody can say, oh yeah, that one must belong to that God who, you know, is in the Bible. And God's kingdom people, we do have different priorities, okay? It means that God, at any time, in any place, can be made visible by our lives, right? It's a physical demonstration of heaven on earth, His values, His love, His power. Yeah, people get to see that in real time through our lives. And really, you and I are the dispensers of God's gifts on the people around us. We put Jesus on display through our lifestyle. And, you know, we're in the stewardship season where we're talking about our money and our stuff. And what's kind of interesting to realize is all of our money and stuff is actually God's. It's His stuff, His money. And He's loaned it to you and me for our journey through life. Okay? And He expects you and me to be about His Father's business. And what is that? It's healing broken lives with His love. It's telling people that don't know Him about how much He cares for them. It's about you and me fighting evil in any of its forms and taking on the world and saying, no, there's a better way. There's a God who made us, who loves us, and that's why we live, and that's how we live, and that's what makes us Christians. And let me put it into a different format. Juan Carlos Ortiz was a missionary from Argentina, and he tells the story that this man finds this amazing jewel, and he goes, oh, I've got to have it. And the seller says, well, it's kind of expensive. It's going to cost you everything that you have. The man says, I want it. I'll go to my house and get the $10,000. And the guy goes, oh, you have a house? It'll cost you a house. He goes, well, then I'm going to have to live in my garage. He goes, oh, garage. Yeah, that's going to cost you the garage too. He goes, well, what am I going to do with my car? He goes, oh, you have a car. Yeah. Okay. Cost you a car. He goes, well, my wife and kids aren't going to like this. Oh, wife and kids. Yep. Cost you them also. And finally he says, well, what am I going to do? He goes, oh, yeah, you. You too. It costs your life. When Jesus comes in, He's kind of greedy. He wants everything about you. And then He does this amazing thing where He says, okay, all that you have is now mine, and I'm going to give it back to you. But whenever I need it, I'm going to call on you to release it for my kingdom purposes. Your house, your family, your finances, your life, everything about you belongs to me, and you're now the steward of it. And I don't know about you, but from a kingdom perspective, to know that all of our stuff, all of our finances, all of our life belongs to Him, it can be a little bit challenging. I remember one time, my wife and I, we were going to get a new car. And, when I met her, she was in a luxury car, so, I had to get her a luxury car. And so we prayed about it, we worried about it, we saved up for it. It was showtime to buy the car. And so I say, you know how you play these games with God? God, this is your car. It's your car, God. Okay. And so, first ride out in my new car, a homeless person walks up to me. Hey, sir, can you take me down to the shelter? It's, just a couple miles down, and I would really appreciate it. And I'm like, my brand new car, and the Lord leans in. Whose car? I'm like, oh. And just in case you've never worked with homeless people, sometimes they don't smell so good. I'll give you a real life example. One time, I took a homeless friend of mine someplace, and it took me about 2 weeks to get the stench out of my car. Okay? So, this is a real thing. And I'm like, yeah. Come on into my car. Took him where I had to go. It was the first ride. It's the Lord saying, okay, is that really my car? And yeah, it's the way it works. But here's the thing. If you don't see your life as under God's ownership, you end up spending your time worrying. Am I going to have enough? Am I going to have enough finances to get through, to buy what I want to purchase? And this is what Jesus says. Seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. Okay, He's going to meet all your needs. He's going to give you the desires of your heart. Whatever you ask, He will provide. He'll even give you a stress-free life. Any stressors out there? Guess what? When you walk with Him, you don't have to be stressed because He promises to keep an eye on your journey through life. And let's be honest, don't we worry about running out of money in our retirement? Don't we worry about the economy collapsing, the stock market correcting itself, and there goes all of our cash? Or how about when the bank decided to devalue our homes back in 2009, right? Ouch. We haven't even got to the health problems and the relational rifts. And all these issues cause us to live in fear. And friends, fear is the opposite of how God wants you and I to live. You know, E. Stanley Jones is one of the great missionaries from the past. And he wrote this book, Transformed by Thorns. And this is what he says in it. I am inwardly fashioned for faith, not for fear. Fear is not my native land. Faith is. I live better by faith and confidence than I do doubt, fear, and anxiety. In worry, my being is gasping for breath. But in faith, I breathe deeply. That's my native air. And friends, I want you to hear me. Fear deteriorates the quality of your life and actually destroys you physically. A doctor from Johns Hopkins University said this: we don't know why worriers die sooner than non-worriers, but they do. Wow. You see, faith, it breathes life and joy into our mind and our body. You and I are inwardly constructed by God, tissues, nerves, cells, brain, soul, for faith, not for fear. And when you and I live by worry, you're living against how God created you. And what do we worry about most? The other God, mammon, our finances. And that's why Jesus spoke about it so much. And the fear of scarcity, it not only impacts our health, but it impacts our relationships. In Luke 12, we have a man who has an abundance, and he decides, I'm going to build bigger barns. And what's interesting is he makes this important decision consulting only himself. Okay? And this is a byproduct of wealth. It generally causes us to withdraw from our neighbors. Okay, we isolate ourselves. He asks himself, oh, what should I do with my excess? I know, I'll build bigger barns. He didn't ask God, who would have suggested that the bellies of the poor would be better storehouses than bigger barns. The self, the original sin, truly. It comes up in this passage, my crops, my barn, my grain, my goods, myself. And he concludes, oh, I have ample goods laid up for many years. Let me take ease, eat, drink, and be merry. And let's be honest, that's the goal for some of us. But somebody made in the image of God, a life of leisure is such an underperforming way to do life. God wants to give you eternal significance so that you can change society. You can increase the population of heaven. You can transform lives. That's what takes place when we involve God in our finances. And what's interesting in our passage, when God interrupts this gentleman and says, you fool, this very night your soul is demanded of you. In the Greek, the phrase, your soul is demanded, is the same terminology for a return on a loan. In other words, you were loaned this affluence, and now you're going to have to give an account. You know, we think we have the right to live the way we want to, but they actually, you know, whether you get 10 days or 90 years of life, it's a loan from God, a gift, and we should be grateful for it. And again, we're going to give an account for how we lived. When did I see you hungry and thirsty and in need and take care of you or not take care of you? Well, this is the problem with mammon, money, and materialism. It interferes with people. And those are the ones God wants us to invest our lives in. People. You know, when John the Baptist asked Jesus, are you the one? This is how Jesus responded. Tell John what you see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and good news is proclaimed to the poor. How did Jesus define himself? By caring for people. This was his calling, and by the way, what he transferred to you and me. Jesus defines love as an action, not a feeling. This is how we know what love is. He laid his life down sacrificially. And guess what? We're called to lay our lives down for other people. Okay? When somebody you know or maybe don't know is struggling and it's on our radar, it becomes our calling, our spiritual responsibility, opportunity to put God into motion. 1 John 3:17 says, if anyone has material possessions and sees a sister or brother in need and has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in them? In other words, it's by putting our material resources into motion for somebody that shows that we're operating under the Spirit of God. And friends, that is the mandate for all Christians. We don't just get to get saved and, wait to die and go to heaven. No, we get saved so that he comes in and he transforms us so that we now see life through God's eyes and our heart pulses with his compassion and we strategize on how we might be the solution to somebody's problem. Okay? It's God releasing his resources through you. And this brings up the second most important thing in our lives, the other God, money. Again, Jesus spoke about it so much because it demonstrates what we value most in life. It's kind of like that mirror. So, who are you really? I was surprised to learn that AIDS is still devastating the continent of Africa. Now, I just assumed it was taken care of, and I looked it up yesterday, and I saw the stats throughout all the countries. It's still a big issue. And I remember one time these parents died, and they left their children as orphans, and it was a brother and sister, and they floated from hut to hut trying to find food, and they would even dig into cow pies to see if they could get some maize just to stay alive. Well, the World Vision Ministry found them, fed them, and the older brother shared his story. He says, both of our parents died and nobody was able to take care of us. And with the brave composure, he said, my mother and father prayed every day, and they taught us that God would help us through our difficult times. Then his voice broke up and he stared at the ground. And friends, that's where you and I come into play. That's when you and I bring the heart of God for people that don't have the touch of God, be the feet of God, the mouthpiece of God, the presence of God, his solution to situations like this. To be God's people are to be people after God's own heart. And his heart was for the broken and the hungry and the lost. And actually, this is in Ezekiel 18. This is how God defines a righteous life. They give their food to the hungry and provide clothing for the naked. Friends, you and I are the bank of God for the world around us. And I'm going to just say, in our ministry here, we prioritize Kenya. We have a ministry to Haiti. We have 2 different ministries on 192. We're doing our best to carry out his calling to help those overwhelmed by life. But here's where it gets personal. Sometimes we dismiss the calling because, actually I don't have enough to be generous and to give sacrificially, even though I have a 6-figure income, it's just not enough in our mind. We know that it's hard to make ends meet. And Jesus comes along and he says, well, if you're faithful with little, I will give you much. And so all of a sudden, every one of us has to stop and say, okay, am I being faithful with what God has given me? Are the poor and the lost on my calendar, in my prayers, part of my budget? Is my Christianity intersecting my life? Because if it isn't, you're missing out on what God wants to do through you and for somebody else. And this is a peculiar problem for Americans because we're the epitome of the mammon culture. We're the capitalists of the world. Okay, we pursue the American dream. And here's the problem with the American dream. There's never enough. It's kind of like John Rockefeller. How much is enough? He goes, just a little more. Okay? That's what happens. We just a little more is needed, so it gets in the way of us ever living like New Testament Christians, and nobody's life really gets touched by our Christianity. And again, this is why Jesus talks about it. He knew it would be a primary stumbling block in our spiritual life. And today, this isn't about me shaking you down. This is a question you have to deal with God about. Your finances. Does He have access to them? And the worst part is, you're going to forfeit the opportunity for God to move through you and change this world with His love. You're going to miss the chance to increase the population of heaven. You're not going to have any eternal significance. Okay? You got blessed. You enjoyed the blessings. Nobody else did. And guess what? You chose to live in the natural when we're all called to live in the supernatural. When my kids were little, they used to have a hamster. You ever have a hamster in the house? Yeah. And they have the little hamster wheel. And the hamster gets in that wheel and he starts running. And he's going fast. He's actually making pretty good time. Okay? But he doesn't go anywhere. And I feel like this is what the whole mammon seduction is. We're spinning our wheels trying to find happiness, which is always eluding us. There's always a new version. There's always something better. There's always, the upgrade. And so we're never happy with what we have. And it's a cage that enslaves us to our passions and desires. I think it's intriguing. In Haiti, they blend voodoo with Christianity. Okay? But here's the thing. The devil and Jesus, they don't go together. Okay? That's what they do in Haiti. What do we do in America? We mix Christianity with materialism. And here's the challenge. Okay? Christianity brings salvation, and we like that. But we go after things rather than souls, rather than people. And that's where God's heart breaks. And friends, that's what you and I are called to do. Go make disciples. I was reading about Abraham Lincoln, and he's passing through a town, and a slave auction is underway. And an African woman is in chains on the auction block. And this angered Lincoln, and so he gets involved, and he starts, bidding for this woman, and somebody else is bidding, and, it's going back and forth. And finally, he outbids that person. And they bring this woman to Lincoln, and he says, unshackle her. And they unshackle her, and he tells her, okay, you're free to go. And she says, what do you mean I'm free to go? Yeah, you're free to go. She goes, you mean I don't have to go home with you? No, you don't have to go home with me. You mean I don't have to do whatever you tell me to do and fulfill your whims and fancies and be your slave? He goes, none of that. She starts crying, and she goes, well, I might as well just go home with you then. And I feel like the Lord came in and He grabs a hold of us and He frees us from all this stuff that the world offers that's really just, an unsatisfying quest. And He offers something meaningful, a relationship with God, offers something powerful, a life where His Spirit is moving through us. He offers us a life of significance and an eternal purpose. And I guess, you and I kind of have to make the same choice. Are we going for this life or that life? We're at a disadvantage as Americans because, our American lifestyle is all about, mammon. But when we step into Christ's world, suddenly there's a new value system. And by the way, in 1 Timothy 6:10, it says this, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And how many times has the inheritance destroyed the family? or finances got in the way of a friendship, or somebody got offended about a cash distribution, and a lifelong relationship is over. It's a real thing. And for you and me, we can't give ourselves to money and to God. Jesus says, you're going to serve God or you're going to serve mammon. Both require our allegiance. Both require our time, our energy, our attention, our focus. And God's asking you and me to care for the broken and the lost. And here's the thing, friends. Both of those require an offering. And it comes down to how important are people made in the image of God to each one of us. Let me close things up here. Ruby Scott was a missionary to the Tila Indians in the jungles of South Mexico. And they translated the Bible into that village's language. And they recorded it on phonographs. And they put it on records. And then you would hand crank the phonograph. And they would, deliver the gospel. So they take it into the jungles and they play this phonograph. And one of the witch doctors gives his life to Jesus. Okay, it's a pretty big deal. And so he gets excited and he goes, can I take this to my witch doctor friends so that they can hear about the love of God and Jesus as well? So the missionary says, sure. So he finds his buddies and he plays the phonograph and they get offended. How can you dump the gods that gave you all their power? We don't want anything to do with you. Get out of here. And he kept pleading with them and reasoning with them. And all it did is, they pulled out their machetes. Get out of here. So he's picking up the phonograph and he's leaving. And he goes, well, but one more thing. And he turns around and one of them swings his machete at the phonograph. And he puts up his hand to stop it. And whew, 3 fingers gone. Well, goes back to the station, missionary station, wraps his hands. And the whole time he's just going, gosh, they didn't hear the message. It didn't touch their hearts. I know. I'll go back there tomorrow and tell them again. You're like, wow. I mean, didn't you just lose 3 fingers? I don't know about you, but that's pretty much where I would stop. I got to take the hint, right? But when Jesus grabs hold of your heart, you don't care about 3 fingers. You're willing to use your life so that somebody else might encounter his love. I mean, think about all the times that we tried to share our faith and our friends got an attitude and we never brought it up again. Or somebody we really cared about, they had a little bit of an atheist background and we just let it be rather than step in and go, hey, I want you to reconsider. How easily we let people just be lost. Friends, I'm just telling you, Christians are called to give their lives. And it starts by you and I financially empowering the ministry of our church, his church, the souls we're going after. And I'm going to be honest with you, we need you right now, okay? We're running out of weeks to meet the budget, and the number is kind of intimidating. I will assure you we've been fiscally responsible and we keep to a tight budget, but we did make some strategic moves. We invested in, creating a 3rd floor in the Christian Life Center so that more children can meet Jesus Christ. We launched into a Halloween ministry where thousands of people were on the grounds and we did our best to try to tell them about Jesus. It all started back at Bethlehem Experience last year. Last year we bought, couple $1,000s worth of Bibles, and we brought in Spanish-speaking church folks so that they could, share the gospel, and we preached the message the best we could so that people might meet Jesus through our ministry here. And the goal, the theme of 2024 is becoming bold ambassadors for Jesus Christ. And I'm just going to tell you, we've been bold. We've boldly stepped into opportunities. We've had numerous events where literally thousands of people have been on the grounds, and we're taking advantage of it. We're stepping forward in faith, because what does it say in Hebrews 11:6? It's impossible to please God except through faith. So we've put our faith into motion. So here we are at the end of the year. We're coming up on the biggest ministry of the year. And we need Christians to step forward. We need Christians to make that sacrificial gift. I guess what I'm really asking you to do is to let your Christianity be the avenue that God reaches more souls. Let's put our faith into motion.